Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Excelcast. I'm your host, Joe Parker. And today I have one of my colleagues, also a rapper, goes by Oryah. His name is also Oryah. Ladies and gentlemen, Oryah Brown. Oryah, how you doing, man?
Oh man, I'm doing great, bro. It feels good to be on the podcast, man. I love everything you're doing. Great show, and I'm looking forward to it, man. I'm excited for this convo.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So let's start with your rapping career. Where did you start rapping? Why'd you start rapping? What's the inspiration behind that?
Yeah, so I'm sure you know a little bit. As far as starting off back in middle school, actually, got into the production side of music through instrumental making, like beat making and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I was doing that actually for a long time, up until 2019, 2020 ish. Right around the pandemic, I kind of just started losing the passion as far as producing. So I kind of went through. It was weird because at the time, like I knew that I didn't want to produce anymore, but there also wasn't something else creatively that filled that void until the end of that year when I finally started rapping. And rapping itself, it was something that I love the genre itself. I was always like a listener, an avid listener, and even as I was making beats and like working with other artists, like here and there, I'd like write my own stuff every now and then just to do it. But I didn't really have any interest as far as like pursuing it as a career itself. Um, but honestly, I give a lot of credit too to my recording engineer. He goes by Nate Cobain, and I had met him one time at his studio with a couple other artists that I work with now, and I figured like, all right, I know this guy now, has his own studio and whatnot. He's pretty good. And I recorded my first song, I think it was like probably like August or like September 2020, over at his studio just for fun, at that point. And people really liked it, a lot, and a lot of people telling me to keep going, and I just kind of from there slowly just kind of fell in love with the process.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Taking a chance on yourself, even though you lost a passion with beat making, and specifically talking about that. What do you think? Do you think it was like a redirection that you lost the passion for beat making? Like, how
Yeah,
did that play out?
yeah, I'd say honestly, if like at the time I don't even think I realized it, but like as time has passed since, yeah, honestly, just redirecting. And I think in some ways too, like a lot of the things, there are some like similarities, obviously, still being in the music industry itself. I know with producing, like I think one of the main things that kind of like had me losing the passion for it was definitely like the business aspect of it.
Mhm.
Or even just like the trying to do business with like certain artists and whatnot, and then just like the nature of the genre itself. Some artists have like egos, some have attitudes and whatnot. I just it's an interesting industry. It's an interesting industry. Whereas with rapping, you still deal with like a lot of you know whether it's like industry nonsense or just like trying to do collaborations with people and shit just not being on the same page. But overall, again, just like the creative process itself. And I will say too, like I've always been a pretty good writer myself. So I think the fact that, if anything, too, being able to like combine music with writing in that way as well, just kind of really shaped like the pivot itself. And logically, it just made sense. Just going from producing to now being an artist myself. And in some ways, I'd say in some ways producing even gave me a little bit of an edge when I started being like a full time artist myself. I feel like I have a pretty good understanding as far as like what my voice will more than likely sound good on instrumentally versus what it won't per se. Or even just knowing how to like go about the business as far as like contacting these producers and whatnot, making sure everything's straight on their end. Because producers have to go through a lot of shit, man. It's a rough industry for the instrumentalists out there, but a lot of that isn't even on them. It's just like the nature of it. So, but yeah, it's just it's interesting having both perspectives now.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that I was going to touch on is you have both perspectives, right? So you understand when producers say, "Hey, we're going to change a beat up a little bit like this because it would go better with your voice." Then once they do it, you're like, "Oh yeah, you're right." Or even beforehand, you're like, "Okay, let me trust them because when I was in that position, I wanted my artist to sound the best." And if you let your ego get in the way, right? You're going to be like, "Well, my voice sounds good on whatever. Like, why are you saying this?"
Yeah.
Whereas when you have both of those perspectives, it diminishes the ego a lot because you have, you understand both sides of the coin. So I think even though you lost passion for producing and making instrumentals, because of that, you're now a better artist because of it.
Yeah, and you know what else too, bro? I'll even add on to that as well, because you're absolutely right. But then even on the flip end of it, like let's just say, I'm collaborating with a producer and they might have a suggestion or something that I can do. And I'm always open to at least trying stuff, obviously. So I might even try it out myself, and then maybe I myself am not liking the result because at the end of the day, it's still my song too, as well.
Yeah.
I think even also like having the history with producing, I feel like a lot of producers that I have worked with can at least respect my opinion to an extent too more because of
Yeah, so it gives you a little bit of credibility when you have an opinion on what they're doing.
right.
Okay.
And I think and just respect in general. I feel like that's another thing that's really important about the music industry. That I feel like a lot of people lack and can like hinder your career in a lot of ways. Like no matter what aspect of the business you're doing in the moment, like you got to be respectful with anybody you work with. And obviously you should expect the same. And if you don't get the the same back, then obviously you can pivot and move on. You know who you want to do business with in the future and whatnot. But I always try my best to move with respect, whether it's like producers, other artists, anyone honestly, really, even outside of music.
Yeah, because I can understand from a music perspective how it's really important because the work that's coming from it is creative work. So it's a part of that person. But, respecting anything is definitely important. Respecting any line of work, just being a decent human being in general is pretty important.
Yeah,
But I definitely understand the key importance of it when it comes to being in a creative environment because people view those things as part of themselves. And while that can play into their ego a little bit, at the same time, you need to understand that that can be the case and learn and respect them, a little bit better.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So you also, not only do you rap, but you also did the podcast for the Kutztown SBDC. So how was that experience for you?
Yeah, man, that was pretty cool, man. That was a pretty interesting experience. I'll say this too, like at the time, I remember when I first joined on to SBDC, I knew that my role was going to be working. Like, I remember getting the position, joining on, and, still like, I didn't have all the details yet, obviously. But I was told, okay, like, I'd be working with a podcast.
Okay.
I remember at the time, right, with that information, and that's the only information I had for like a minute. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Before actually like getting really into the grip of it. So I'm thinking in my head, like, all right, bet, like probably gonna like help market a podcast and whatnot, help out with promotion and whatnot. I did not realize I was actually gonna be doing a podcast at the time.
Yeah. They gave you that whole thing. They say, here, you take care of it.
But the one thing I will also say too, like I do give the SPDC a lot of credit for that as well. Like they gave me a ton of creative freedom as far as like,
Yeah.
so it was a really cool experience. It was also really cool as well, just seeing how, like obviously I've had myself recorded and I listen to myself in a musical setting, but it is very different too. Just having to kind of refresh my memory from the producing days as far as figuring out like the editing and whatnot, getting all technical in that aspect. Even planning out each episode in advance, which I'm sure you can obviously relate to and whatnot. And
Yeah.
I think that from an outsider, not maybe not all, but I think some outsiders have the perspective that people that start their own shows and podcasts, like it's pretty just improv, run of the mill, like okay, what. And I didn't entirely feel that way prior to starting at SPDC, but I definitely like now having done it, having a better understanding as far as like the craft as far as podcasting, but then also just how much work really does go into it behind the scenes that a lot of people don't know about or won't give the credit for.
Yeah. I mean, not only is it sitting down and actually doing the session, it's figuring out, researching who you're interviewing, studying who you're interviewing,
Yeah,
and a lot of also afterwards, editing, marketing, getting it out there, getting the word out there.
checking out the stats, making sure, figuring out who your
Yeah.
audience is. And whatnot.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you were talking to me about that a little bit too. This all started because I came up to you and I was like, "Yo, I know you did the podcast. Like, do you have any sort of information that can help me?" And you did give me a lot of good tips that I really, took and applied to what I do and how I view, my stats, especially because you were really keen on that. You were like, make sure you look at who your audience is. If your audience is in this area, talk about these things. If your audience is this age, talk about these things. So I definitely have been paying attention to that more since that conversation. And
Yeah,
also,
I appreciate that.
yeah, man, absolutely. And also about the SBDC, the fact that they gave you the podcast and the creative freedom, like you said, it
Yeah,
shows that they really have trust with their employees, which is one of the main things that I look for whenever I want to, be with a company. And I liked working there. I still work there, but yeah, it's definitely a good environment to be in, and I'm glad you also got the chance to work there because then we also made that connection.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, so it just speaks to the type of work environment that they have, that they allowed you to have that sort of creative freedom when it came to the podcast as well.
yeah.
And to
Well,
be quite honest with you, I haven't really listened to that podcast too much. I probably should though. I probably should. Do you have an episode that you recommend?
um, I know. I know the first one's pretty popular. Like, the very first one was pretty
Okay.
cool. I actually interviewed my recording engineer for that one as well. I tried to keep the show itself, like topic wise, just focusing on like a key aspect as far as business and entrepreneurship, and then from there I would kind of get guests on could kind of relate to those specific things. So I know like that first episode kind of focusing on the topic of time management.
Okay.
Man, my recording engineer, he has his own studio, so he's booking people for sessions and whatnot. It's all time based, so I knew okay, he'd be a perfect person for this topic. We
Yeah.
start beforehand and whatnot. So I say that one's a pretty popular one. But in general, though, I think they're all pretty solid. And it was
Yeah.
like a really, it
How
was
about it?
definitely a really fresh experience. It was a really fresh experience. There's, obviously everything's not gonna go perfect at all times. Like it was my first time doing it and whatnot. You
Yeah.
know, yeah, I say it's definitely worth a listen if you ever get the
Yeah.
chance.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I will. I'll listen to the first episode for sure since you recommended it. And speaking of, just planning and how you said that you had your guest on, your recording man, was it recording manager on or
Recording engineer. Recording engineer.
recording engineer on? That's the official name. You had him on, and because you were talking about time management for this specific episode, your word was longevity.
Yes.
So, yeah. So, can you tell me a little bit about why you chose longevity as your word?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, even going back to the very first question, just having the transition. I mean, even actually, you know what? Even prior to that, even just producing itself, like I did that for a long time, for a very long time. I think even to the point where, for a lot of people that knew me personally, even outside of just like the music stuff, like it did kind of become a part of my identity because of how ingrained I was in it for so many years. And I remember even going through a time when, again, during the pandemic, I stopped and I didn't have anything that really filled that void. But also, I remember it being a hard time for a lot of people in my life to kind of like not necessarily accept, but I'd have conversations where someone's like, "Oh man, why'd you stop making beats, man? Oh my gosh!" Or just even having people just doubting that like I was really done with it. Like, nah, no way you quit, bro. Like, oh my gosh, so I did it for so many years, and I'd say I was pretty good. At the time of me leaving as well, and I had a lot of momentum at the time and everything too, and the passion just dropped, and it was a weird time for me. It was I knew it was something that I needed to do, but it was a weird time because, like I said, it was a really big part of my identity at that point. I was always like the music guy.
Yeah.
So but then even then having it then translate into rapping, and then even before that, I didn't really touch on it, but I've even done some music journalism for a couple years.
Okay. What
So
is that specifically? Like, what does that entail actually?
so I had during the pandemic, I had stopped producing,
Yeah.
and I had an Instagram page at the time that
Mm.
started off. I was just kind of covering like music news type, like little Instagram posts, like, oh, so and so did this, so and so did that, etc., etc. And during the time, it kind of transitioned into album reviews as well. It was just like a hobby, I just kind of did it on the side just to like express my passion for music and hip hop itself.
Okay.
So, the pandemic started, and I always had the idea of turning it into a website.
All right.
Eventually I did that. It's called www.wavmax.com. And I was doing album reviews for a long time, just covering different topics and whatnot. Eventually, that led me to getting a position with FM Hip Hop, a hip hop publishing company in New York. I did a couple articles for them for about a year. And again, and what's funny too, even similar with beats, going back to December of this past year, just kind of lost the passion for writing. You know what I mean? Like I still love writing, but sometimes you can ride a tricky slope when your passions become your job or source of income.
Yeah.
And I kind of went through the same thing with writing, but at the time I was still at least rapping. So now, all of 2023, my focus has been on rapping. But all of that to say though, I chose longevity just because, even if you think you're on a specific path, you never know what's gonna happen with life. You never know what's gonna happen in the world, and also too, like I'm young. You know what I mean? Like I'm about to be 23 next month. You know what I mean? I'm mad young. So
Yeah.
even if you think you're on a specific path, and granted, like the whole common thread of all of those things has been music. I know that that's my passion, but sometimes just because your path looks like something at the start, it doesn't mean that it can't grow and change and evolve over time. And I think where the longevity comes into play is just making sure that, you're giving it your all no matter what you're doing. Like as long as you have the love for it and you have the work ethic, just keep going and it'll carry over. You know what I mean? Like at the time, like even when I started rapping, like I didn't think I'd do like half the things I even did like since starting. You know what I mean? Like I've performed in a couple different cities and stuff. I've had different articles written about my music, and I'm like, damn, like somebody cares enough to give their opinion on this. Like that's kind of cool. Like so
Yeah.
I would just say that whatever you're passionate about, keep it strong and don't force it. If you stop loving something, that's okay. Maybe you'll come back to it, or maybe you'll come back to it in a different form.
Yeah. Or maybe it'll even help you out, like how beats, producing helps you out now. And I think that passion is something that a lot of people get confused sometimes. They'll be like, oh, well, I'm so passionate about this, I have to stick in this. No,
Yeah,
you can switch from thing to thing as long as you maintain that passion and maintain that drive.
exactly.
Because just because one thing didn't work out doesn't mean that something else can't work out. And I feel like sometimes people get stuck in a mindset where consistency means that they have to stay at the same job. No, consistency means that you need to show up every
Yeah,
day, regardless of what you're doing. So if you have to switch that up in order to maintain that consistency and that fire, that's fine. Like with me, with my weight loss, right? I ran a lot, but then it got to a point where running wasn't doing me any good. So now I had to start lifting a little bit. Then I had to
right.
kind of mix in lifting and running a little bit. And just because I wasn't running, 8 miles anymore, it doesn't mean that I didn't lose the passion for working out. So you can switch up what you're doing, but still maintain whatever it is that you're passionate about. Just like you, even though you went from, making beats to journalism to rapping to podcast, it's all kind of like the media music industry. You
Yeah,
stayed within that realm, you bounced around, you're actually gaining more skills by bouncing around. You're becoming a more whole, developed individual music producer. Like it's just music is you and it's your passion. And I
yeah,
think that's why when you told people that, hey, I'm done making beats, they were like, nah, no way, not you, because you're passionate about that.
yeah,
So there's no way that, and it speaks to them because they may be passionate about something and they may look to you and be like, yo, if Oryah is not making beats, like I got no hope left. Like not that they don't have any hope left, but
but honestly, bro, you're saying that honestly, and like I'm sure probably sounds crazy to some people though, but honestly, like there was a couple people like that. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
it also goes to show like how much too like your own passion can even impact other people, or even if it's not like, it's not even like again like even if it's not impact, just influence or just inspire. Think
yeah,
future. And I'll even add too as well, real quick as well. Like I know that in some cases it is easier said than done, or specifically too in the music industry, because I like how you mentioned the consistency aspect of it. There's a
yeah.
lot of pressure in music, like whether you're an artist, producer, it doesn't even matter. There's a lot of pressure to stay consistent
Yep.
because of the algorithms and what the industry wants and whatnot. But and it's like, yeah, you do have to play the game as far as that a little bit. But like you said, you know what I mean. Like if it's not like you have to do it forever, or even again, it might change and evolve. And moreover too, like yeah, play the game, but if you're not feeling it, you can't force it either. And like, what's the point of being consistent if you're consistently putting out low effort material because you don't even like what you're
There you go. That's it. Great
doing?
point. Yeah. Just like with anything in life. Yeah. I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head with that, saying that you can be consistent, but if it gets to a point where, yeah, you're doing it, but you're doing it with low energy, the people you're around are getting a low energy you because you're just tired of doing that same thing over and over again. Now, keep in mind, we always want to keep getting better.
Right.
But getting better doesn't always mean like, hey, I want to keep beating on this skill. No, it gets to a point where you've mastered that skill, or you've gotten what you needed from that skill to an extent. Now it's time to grow, and growing sometimes is you going out of your comfort zone. And a lot of people, it's a great, really gray, thin, fine line when it comes to consistency and growth. And where does it become not growing because you're too consistent? And, you know,
Yeah.
trying to maintain that balance, the growth consistency balance.
Yeah. And like you said, it is a very fine line, gray area. It's different for everybody. I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so just you know, being a rapper and making beats and also the podcast as well. Is there anything from the podcast that you took that helps you with making beats or rapping at all?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, obviously with rapping itself, just getting more, I'd say with the rapping itself, I was already getting better as far as just maybe not even necessarily public speaking, but just being expressive of myself out loud in a public forum. You know what I mean? So
Okay. Yeah.
at that point too, starting with SBDC and then doing the podcast, I feel like that kind of like you said added new skills as far as that, and just expanded it more. You know what I mean? Because it's also easier. It's easy to do a performance where you're performing a piece of art that you wrote, where yeah, you're still expressing yourself out loud vocally, but there's music behind it, there's an aesthetic behind it, like it's but with the podcast thing, it's different because again, like it's in the podcast itself, it's like I might throw some music like in the intro or outro maybe or something like that of like my old beats and whatnot, but like it still is very much like okay, and especially if you don't have a guest on as well, like how am I with my own voice and what I have to say gonna keep these people entertained for this long majority of time? And that goes back to as well where podcasting is like it is a very, it's not even that it's very hard, but it takes a lot. You have to really, you can't just sit there and be like, oh yeah, I feel like starting a podcast one day. Like, nah, there's a lot of time that goes into that shit, and again, overall, I feel like it really helped as far as just even growing as a public speaker, you know. And I'd also like to add as well too. I feel like I also got a better sense of what it's like because I'm very much a pretty independent person. I like to do things alone most times or individually myself. I've just always kind of been that way growing up, and I will say too, like even having guests like for the podcast, like now, not only being responsible for time management on my end or making sure that I'm on point, but making sure that I can hold other people accountable or working with somebody else's schedule, and that applies to even things outside of music too, just in life. It's very important skills that I will say that I am thankful that the SBDC gave me the opportunity for, and just in general, specifically to Rachel Wolf as well. I want to do shout her out as well specifically because I wouldn't even had the position if not for her, honestly.
Yeah. So how has she been? She been like a mentor to you with how you've been running the podcast, or like speak to how she's helped you with the podcast, or just personally.
Yeah, I mean, I would say definitely like, everything as far as the creative freedom, I was never really shunned away from an idea that I had or just even how I wanted to go about it, itself. The whole blueprint itself of how the podcast ran, that was all just off the spur of, okay, I think this is how it should go. Let's try it out. And just tweak things from there. But, just having the freedom to do that, as well, it's always nice when you have a supervisor that's willing to hear your ideas out and make you feel comfortable to express yourself and try new things. And then I'd also say too, just even just being able to push and help me stay on track with that as well. And throughout the whole time, like I never felt like I had somebody overseeing me, like, oh yeah, this has to be done at a certain time, and if not, you're gonna. It never felt like that. You know what I mean? But I also
Yeah.
still felt a sense of like, okay, I am gonna be held accountable for what I'm doing. So let me make sure I am on point. I am, accountable for myself. Make sure everything is going smoothly because this person right here is giving me the freedom to do it, and I have all the support I need to do this. So I'm not going to go ahead and disappoint that. You know what I mean? And it's rare to really meet people like that in the professional setting.
Yeah, and being able to have that creative freedom too, that makes you want to put it out and you want to get it done on time because you have that creative freedom. Now, if they were like, you need to talk about these points, you need to do this, it needs to be 24 and a half minutes long, like
Right.
like all this stuff,
Right.
you would just be there sitting there like, okay, I got to talk to this person for 24 minutes about this and this. And it would just be like, when it's like, oh, you could do, stay within this realm, right? But do whatever you want to do with it. It fosters a little bit of, because it's part of you then, right?
Yeah.
And that's what, inspires people that you are working with to do their job properly and do their job to their best extent. Is like, hey, this is part of you. Like, this is you. This isn't the Kutztown SBDC and you're just working for it. Like, this is Oryah Brown and he's doing the podcast, and what is he going to create with the time and knowledge that he has? And I think that really, inspired you to do your best when it came to that.
100%. Yeah, definitely. And I'll also even add just one last thing as well. As far as Rachel, just the communication aspect as well.
Yeah.
Um, because again, I'm trying out different ideas, and like you said, it's nice having the creative control, but obviously you have to be open to criticism or seeing what other people think and whatnot as well. And I will say my time at SBDC, I never really had any issues as far as that. If I ever had any questions for anything, if I needed help or support as far as anything with the podcast, very easy to contact. Very easy to get that help that I may or may not have needed. And yeah, overall, a pretty great experience.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I mean, Rachel's my supervisor as well, and she definitely is very open, very honest, and but at the same time, she will tell you how it is. So
Right.
she's definitely a good person to be under, and definitely a good person to be in the position that she's in.
Yep.
So, what were some main challenges that you had growing up, being in the music industry? You could start with growing up if you would like to.
Um, I'd say growing up, I would say that's a really good one. That's a really good question.
Yeah,
I would say
challenges, development. What was a main turning point in your life where you were like, okay, like I'm gonna really focus on these certain things. Whatever you want to share.
you know what, honestly, kind of heading into puberty, like maybe not during the teenage years specifically, but kind of like that, 11, 12-ish, like age range ish. At the time itself, my parents prior had been together and split at that point in time.
Mm.
So I'd say that was a pretty unique experience as far as my life that helped shape my journey as well.
Yeah,
That experience, and I think even with that as well, because I was primarily living with my mom and my sisters at that point, but even and granted, like again, my dad was like around and stuff. Like I would see him every now and then. We didn't always see eye to eye though. Like we have a pretty good relationship now, but
Yeah.
I would say that specific relationship dynamic, I feel like it definitely shaped the way I approach a lot of things. As far as just being a self starter, like all right, if I need to get this done, I'm not gonna try to rely on anybody to do it. I'm just gonna try to do it myself. Stuff like that. And then even as I get older too, because in a lot of ways that is a pretty good quality to have as well. It's good to not have to rely on other people for things. And I would even like to add too, like as far as then getting into music, you know, I'd say the one thing about the music industry that I think anybody from any aspect of it would say is that you definitely face a lot of rejection and you definitely face a lot of, how should I word this? It's a very cutthroat industry. Very cutthroat
A lot
industry.
of criticism.
I'll
Yeah.
never forget. I remember it was like December 2021,
Mm.
and I had got invited out to meet with the record label, just an indie label based in Atlanta. And at the time, I had a lot of family in Atlanta. I did a lot of performances out there during the summer prior to that. So I was like, all right, opportunity and whatnot. Um, went to the meeting. Me and a couple other artists that the label was interested were there, and just meeting like the label exec himself and whatnot. And I won't throw names or anything out there and whatnot.
Yeah, nah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, it was an experience, and I remember too, just you know what I mean. I remember sharing. I shared two songs of mine,
Mm.
and not a lot of people know this story. I shared two songs of mine. The one dude was kind of feeling. The other one, and I remember I was more confident in the other one. I was more confident in the other one. It was like a fan favorite.
Mm.
It's like this R&B song I have called Reflection. It's like I'd say it's like a pretty staple in my discography at the current moment. And I was really confident in that one. I was like, all right, you know what? Let's see what we're working with. And I just remember like, I don't know. There were other things like in the meeting that were discussed in the meeting itself that kind of turned me away from like I don't even know if I would have signed with the label based off of like other things in the meeting itself. I just remember playing that song, bro, and like, and granted, like you know what I mean. Like obviously, it's all subjective. It's all like fair, constructive criticism. But bro was
Yeah.
not fucking with that shit, bro. He was not liking that shit at all, bro.
Mm.
Like at all. But like
Mm.
I remember too because like I was still in the room with like everything was like a group of like 8-ish artists, and like we were all playing our music with him in the same room. And he had a lot more to say like about the other people's music. Like he was trashing a lot of the other people's music. He wasn't as harsh on mine.
Mm.
But in some ways, it kind of fucked me up because I was like, damn, like okay, like he just tore this last person's song apart, but he still like it's still the song itself made him feel something and gave him that much to say. Whereas he didn't
Yeah.
even really comment that much on, you know what I mean? Like, it was in a way, it was like the fact that he wasn't as harsh on mine made me think, like, damn, like, I don't know if that makes sense, but it
It
really messed
does.
me for a while. I was like, damn, and I was really confident too prior to playing the song and everything. And, but long story short, as far as that, I remember that, being a thing. And, flash forwarding to now, like, that's one of my biggest songs, you know what I mean? So, and I mean, shit, I know a lot of other people that like the song and whatnot. Music itself is subjective, but it just goes to show, too, that, even though you face things like rejection and stuff like in the music industry, um, you know, it's always good to keep putting yourself out there because, again,
Yeah.
music is subjective, art is subjective. And yeah, when you tie business into it, it can like take away from that. But ultimately, if you believe in something, just keep going with it. You know what I mean? Because if let's just say I let what he said to me that day affect me that much, and like, oh, I stopped making music and whatnot, I wouldn't be where I'm at now. And I'm definitely not only a bigger artist, but I feel like a more comfortable artist than I was at the time of doing that. And that was just all a matter of just keep going and just not taking the criticism for what it was or taking the opinion for what it was, but having the vision of, okay, even if it was true, like, all right, well then, let me put out more songs. Maybe I can put out a better song. But then also, like I said, like a lot of other people like the song too. So it's you never know. You never know. And I won't say too much about the other label. I won't say too much about the label, but it's like, even the label itself, like 2 years from now, like it's not like they're doing that great either. So, maybe it was for the best. It's
Yeah.
you never know. Like you can't take things to heart, especially in the music industry, because people are cutthroat and music is subjective.
Yeah, absolutely. And just what you said about, I kind of want to elaborate on the fact that you said that even though it made those other people, their other songs made him feel some type of way, and your song didn't even elicit that much of reaction. I
Yeah,
do understand where you're coming from with that, because there's a saying in football that a lot of my coaches would say. They would say, "Don't get upset when I'm yelling at you. Get upset when I stop yelling at you.
hmm
Get upset when you don't hear from me." Because when they yell at you, it's because, yo, we know you got more. We know you got more. But when they don't say much, that means that they don't have faith. And
exactly.
so what they would do is some reverse psychology. Sometimes they like wouldn't talk to you all practice, to like get you to be like, well, wait, hold on now. Like, why are you not talking to me? But
Yeah,
so I understand what you mean by that, because playing football, that's one of the main things that they would say to us. So I see how not getting that reaction would even kind of make you feel a little weird. Also, I've read some psychology stuff where if you're angry, like if you make someone angry, at least that's some sort of passion.
yes,
Whereas if they're depressed and not angry and just laying it down, it's worse than them being angry, because angry means that they have some sort of like energy toward it. Um,
yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like I
So I definitely, from multiple perspectives, I see where you're coming from. When you say that, absolutely.
yeah,
And but it was for the best, man. Look at where you are now, and people like your music, and you feel that. And maybe you get with that label, they start doing what they start doing you have to put out this song. It has to be this long. It has to be, they do what you were afraid of at the SBDC, what not afraid of, but what the SBDC didn't do. They gave you
no,
that freedom.
and
Maybe you get with
literally,
that label, they start putting you in that box, bro. And now they're not putting you in that box.
yeah, and I
So
would.
it was definitely for the better.
Yeah, I'm sorry, not even to cut you off, but
Yeah,
literally, and that's why I say too, like there were other things even in that meeting that I was like, maybe I wouldn't even sign this anyways.
yeah,
That's exactly what it would have been, like for
yeah.
verbatim from the person's own mouth. Like that's exactly what it would have been. And it's like, like yeah, it sucked. Okay, yeah, being rejected obviously sucks in any shape or form, but it's like, once the feelings kind of passed, and then I thought about it more, it's like, oh, okay, well. Yeah, but would I have even wanted to be here in the first place? Like, do I really care that much? Like, stuff
Bro,
like that.
you'll never be rejected from what was meant for you, ever. It won't happen. It won't happen. So even though, like, you were quote unquote rejected, right? In a literal sense, you weren't, because what is meant for you will accept you, will keep you, will take you in. I mean, and will, you'll be on that path. You're never rejected from your proper path. So if you are rejected, you just made the wrong choice on trying to pick which path you're going down. So always remember that, and always have faith in that.
Right. And again, flash forward 2 years later, that's one of my biggest songs. So I fuck it. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that that song worked out for you. It's kind of like a little bit of, you didn't like it, however, everyone else likes it. So maybe you shouldn't be in that industry. Maybe you shouldn't be doing that. Maybe the label should reevaluate who they have as their talent acquisition person. Who knows? But yeah, man. That's so was that one of like the main challenges that you faced as an artist, you would say?
I would say that was probably, I think that was one of the biggest moments of it. I would say just
Okay.
because it was like a literal event that happened. I would say in general though, being an artist, I think one of the main things that a lot of other artists can probably relate to, just getting, at least when you're first starting off, getting people to take you seriously, whether it's your peers or just strangers in general. You know what I
Mm,
mean? Especially with how saturated the industry itself is right now. You know, a lot of
yeah,
people are in the creative space. So it's very important to, establish yourself and make sure you're not looked at like everybody else, or just having everybody make sure that you're taken serious. Now,
yeah,
granted, producing in the past for me kind of helped with that in a lot of
mm,
ways. So I don't really have the full, as I don't have the full perspective of that because of my own history itself. But even outside of that too, because obviously you meet people that don't know you or don't know your history, and I think it's very important too. Like I carry myself very professionally, but also just putting in the work. And okay, you may not know or care about me now, but then flash forward later, if you see me performing in Atlanta or Chicago on your freaking Instagram or something, like you're gonna then be like, all right, whoa, this guy's actually doing something. All right, let's follow suit. And it doesn't even have to be even it can be in a lot of ways. Like there's no like set blueprint to follow per se, but I think that's always something too. Like it's always a battle of convincing people when you're smaller and trying to come up why
yeah,
they should take you seriously, and then at that point, if they like your music, why they should support you.
yeah. Absolutely. I feel like a lot of people, you got to take yourself seriously first,
Yeah,
because when you take yourself seriously and you set goals and you go to achieve those goals, you have to get them. Like you have to hit those
yes,
goals because you're making promises to yourself. I'll hit this goal. I'll hit that goal. And even if it's a statistic goal, like certain amount of followers, you could try your best. You could
right,
make a commitment to yourself, like, hey, I'm gonna do this every week. But that commitment you need to stay to. Like, say I'm gonna post, I'm gonna put out a song a month or a song every 2 months or whatever your commitment may be, right? You need to stay to that commitment. Those are the numbers you got to hit. Now,
yeah,
whatever happens, as if you have a certain number of followers you want to hit by a certain time, that's a variable. But what you put out, the effort number, you always got to hit.
exactly.
Yeah. So I feel like that's very important when it comes to, achieving those goals. And, if you keep achieving those goals and keep hitting those effort goals, you can land yourself way further down the road than you could even imagine sometimes. Sometimes you don't know what you could get out of that effort until you actually put the effort in. And I feel like people really focus on that end goal. Like, wow, if I want to make this much money, I need this many followers. And they look at the whole extravagant piece of the puzzle. But if you just do it piece by piece and just it's small consistent steps and always wanting to grow and always wanting to learn. And I feel like the industry that you're in, you need to be very versatile when it comes to being able to not change how you think, but okay, what should I focus on? Should I focus on my lyrics? Should I focus on the beat? Should I focus on networking? Should I focus on, and a lot of industries are like that, but I feel like a lot of rapping's very, you need to be versatile because it's a creative work and it's also, you need to sell yourself, so it's a business as well. Like business mindset, I
Yeah,
guess I could say.
yeah, you're
You
a
need to have
brand.
a business mindset and a creative mindset, whereas some industries don't require that. So it definitely takes a mind where you can be on both ends of that spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, you like you said too, like you gotta treat yourself like a brand because
Yeah,
essentially, I feel like once you do, when you take that step to really make music your main goal, like you're trying to be a full time artist, you're essentially a brand at that point. You know what I mean? You have to think of yourself as that. And I think even furthermore too, I think it's very important as well to always keep in mind that it's also an industry. The music industry is also ever changing. So to a certain extent, you literally do always have to focus on different things at different points of time, depending on what the state of the climate is.
yeah, absolutely. And I just want to ask you, man, like, what is your mindset when you are just going through that, right? So going through rapping, going through the music industry, but also going through those changes. What is your mindset and how do you maintain your stability through the chaos?
Well, I'd say one of the key ways. tying back into the episode title itself, just keeping like a focus as far as like the long term, um,
Yeah.
goals and whatnot, and even honestly, even going back to the previous topic too, like same thing with as far as dealing with rejection and stuff, just always keeping the focus on the long term plan. You know, everything's not going to come right at once, so I think just keeping that in mind always helps when it comes to navigating or trying to plan things, or whether you need to shift your focus on this for now, even if you may not want to do it, but that might be what you need to do at that moment to get you to the next step towards what you want to do. So I'd say definitely keeping longevity in mind, and I would say for myself personally, just trying to make it as fun as possible for myself. I would say trying to make it as fun as possible and as me as possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
If
Because
you're like,
then you hit that like that wave, right? Like you hit that like it's almost effortless to do what you have to do. Like you find joy in doing what you have to do when you make it you and when you make it fun.
exactly, because it's a lot. You know what I mean? Like everything you
Yeah.
said, like it's not even for me to downplay because with being an artist myself, and that's another thing I've learned since transitioning to artist from producing. Because producing, you got to do a lot of the same things, but like there's less visibility as far as like you don't have to be a public figure as a producer, like things like
Mm-hmm.
that. Whereas,
Yep.
and I myself too, I'm a pretty like introverted person overall. So there's a lot of breaking out of my shell when it comes to being an artist. And I would say like focusing on all the different areas, whether it's the art form or networking or things of that nature, it is a lot. And independent artists, you know what I mean? Like it's a really it's definitely taxing, it's definitely demanding, whether it's time and attention, and it can be a lot. So I don't ever want to downplay it for anybody else too, like, and if there's an independent artist that whose music you like and you support, like, it shit really goes a long way. It really goes a long way. So, with that in mind, like it's always a constant, at least for myself personally, it's always like a constant, I wake up every day and it's you always have to either, whether you're cognitively aware of it or it's in the back of your head, you have to keep those things on your mind at all times. But it does really help when, you really inject yourself into it, or, try your best to have fun with it. And I'd say, like, all right, for an example, I would say that performing is something that I had to grow. I had to grow into loving because I really did not that I didn't enjoy it, but like going back to just my own nature itself, like I'm a pretty like, once I get comfortable, I'm pretty, I can be talkative and whatnot, not going, but I'm pretty like chill and reserved, like for the most part. And like, even the idea of performing at like the very first start of my career, like that shit used to really like, not necessarily like full blown anxiety attack, but I'm like, damn, like, am I really trying to do this right now? Am I ready to do this right
Yeah.
now? But with the experience and just making sure I'm having fun with it, and also making songs that I'm gonna have fun performing with, you know what I mean? It
Yeah.
goes a long way. It goes a very long way.
Yeah. I mean, I can definitely, relate to you on that level because I am introverted as well to a certain extent. Like you
Yeah.
said, when you get comfortable with someone, you start talking to someone, it's really not, that bad. But at first, I had issues with like public speaking growing up. I had a speech impediment. So like I was
Oh, word.
very, very like not keen to public speaking. And it's funny because, we're both kind of like that, and you're a rapper and I do a podcast. So it's about facing those fears though, facing that uncomfortable situation because like how we mentioned earlier, that's how you grow. That's how you progress, and that's how you become a better version of you, and that's how you become more, well rounded.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. So I know that you have a quote prepared, to tell everyone about. So what's that quote that you have?
Um, I would say, always be yourself and never be afraid to be yourself. Like simple as that, I think that one of the key things, even outside of a professional sense or, career sense, and, I think one of the main things that anybody can do for themselves it's just to be yourself, and not overthink it. You know what I mean? I think that we live in a world now where there are a lot of opinions, you know, and it's well, on one hand that's a good thing, but on the other end, obviously, when you're an outlier and you don't fit into the public opinion or you don't fit into societal norms, it's easy to feel alone and isolated. Um, and I think that's another thing too that as I get older, um, I really have been getting not even necessarily better at, but just more comfortable with, because that's the thing. You don't have to force being yourself. It's really just being comfortable. And I think that that specific thing itself, if there's anything that you can do that'll take you to where you want to be, it's simply that. You know what I mean? And then with that as well, obviously that comes with, there's always ways, you can make yourself better, you can improve and whatnot, you know what I mean? But as long as you yourself are staying authentic at your core, you can't really lose in life at that point, to me personally.
Yeah, man. I mean, being yourself, I think for me is having fun.
Yeah.
And it's really what it is. And when you achieve that fun level, that's when you start to flow. So it's all connected, right?
Yeah.
When you're yourself, you're having a good time. And when you're having a good time, you start to flow, you start to work well. Whatever you have to do and whatever you have to face becomes very like, well, it doesn't matter because I'm being myself and I'm having fun. So I'll do whatever I got to do. And it's definitely interconnected. So I think that's great, fantastic advice.
Yeah.
And you definitely show that through your music and through your performing as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'd even like to add too, like that's also a big reason why. Because when I was producing, I didn't even go by my first name like I do now. But I remember when I wanted to start rapping, I was like, all right. Even though like I would never intentionally lie in my own lyrics or like try to portray something that I'm not, but I figured, all right, what's going to be the easiest way to do that? I'm just gonna go by my first name. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
at that point, I can meet somebody like going to the grocery store today that let's just say they remember my name, they try to look me up on socials. I might not even have to introduce myself as an artist to you, but you can even find me and then figure that out myself because I've made that a part of me, but also because I genuinely do love the music itself, and I think even tying back to the long term aspect of things, like you'll also definitely go farther that way too, man. You can only fake it for so long. You know what I mean? When it comes to just like your own, identity. You know what I mean? Like it's, I know a lot of people in the music space, at least like as far as portrayal wise, like trying to portray something that they're not, or come across and portray an image that of whatever they think is popular or will get them more fans and whatnot. And it does work. Like I'm not going to say that there aren't artists that do that successfully, but there's always a certain extent that you can take that. You know what I mean? Eventually, push comes to shove, and you're going to be in a position where like at some point the mask has to come off. At some point, you know what I mean? And whether it's in your control or not, but I think if you're somebody that is keeping it true to yourself, being authentic, and unapologetically, whether you're the most perfect person ever or you're not, you know what I mean? People will respect it more. And overall, again, like I feel like from a long term standpoint, you already have more longevity just off of that alone.
Yeah, man. And find it interesting your perspective on tying it to your name
Yeah,
because for a long time, like my Instagram name personally wasn't my first and last name. But now I've changed it because, and I feel like it also, you realize the value in you when you do things like that. You realize that you don't need, not that this was my intention, maybe it was a subconscious thing that I did, but you don't realize like, you think that alternative name has more power or clout or whatever word you want to use than your real name, when in fact it's the opposite. Your real name, because more people know you as Oryah Brown than people know you as whatever your rapper name was.
yeah,
And as you start rapping, the people who know you as Oryah Brown, they know you. And then the people who know you as Oryah Brown, the rapper, they know you as Oryah Brown. So it actually gives you a base of a community to start with.
exactly. That too. That too.
Yeah.
And honestly, I will also even give that credit to Kendrick Lamar for that as well, because he's one of my favorite artists. And I don't even think that was his
He's
intention,
so
maybe even, but just even just seeing that too, and just other artists. There's a lot of artists that I do enjoy listening to regularly. Just kind of go by their names. I feel like it's a really cool idea. Like obviously that comes with a lot of risk too, and it's not like it's something
yeah.
you have to do. I don't think I'm a better artist for that either, but
Yeah.
it's something that again, like it helps me. It helps remind me, and just it helps even just kind of emphasize. Just yeah, I'm gonna be me, and if you mess with me, hey, welcome. Welcome to the family, and if not, that's okay. I might not be for you, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So if people do want to follow you, what are those handles that they can follow you at?
Yeah, man. So first of all, thank you for listening. If you weren't familiar with me before this, and if you'd like to follow me, I'm on Instagram at Oryah ORYH dot wave WAV. And as well as too, if you want to check out the music itself, it's just my first name, Oryah ORYH, Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon Music. If you use like whatever music platform you have, I'm probably on there as well.
Okay. Same
And
thing on SoundCloud too?
you know what? Actually, man, I'm not gonna lie. I have songs on SoundCloud. I'm not actively on SoundCloud.
Okay.
We're working on that. We're working.
Okay. All right. No, I got you.
And yeah, and then TikTok as well. I'm also same thing as the Instagram handle, ORYAH dot wave WAV. And
Yeah.
then feel free to as well if you're interested. You can also check out my official website as well. I know I mentioned it in the podcast previously. www.thewavmax.com. And then from there you can find my own like artist page. And yeah, I appreciate anybody that takes the time out, and feel free to enjoy, man. There's a lot of great stuff, man. I feel like I don't know. I don't always like brag about myself all the time or anything like that. I feel like I am pretty good as far as like providing content in some way, shape,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I noticed that when I went on your socials. I did.
or form.
It's very intriguing, and you do have a lot of different things on there as well. It's not just the same thing. So
Thank you. Thank
the variability in the content you put out is definitely intriguing. And I'll also drop all of your information in the description below, so whenever they're listening to this, they can look it up if they want to.
you. Thank you.
But yeah, all right, man. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Thank you for sharing your story, your insights, man. It was a great conversation. It allowed me to get to know you more. I've seen you at the gym. Obviously, we work together, but with everything being hybrid, it's kind of
Yeah.
all over the place. But it was definitely nice to find out more about you and talk and discuss things. And yeah, I'm excited for this episode to come out. I think it's definitely going to be a good one. I'm
Bro,
excited
me
for it.
too. I'm not gonna lie, bro. And
Yeah,
honestly, I would say likewise, man. Like you're a really cool guy, bro.
good. Thank you, yo.
I'm very grateful to be on the show itself, and definitely looking forward to it. I think this is a great one.
Yeah, dude. Absolutely, man. And for everyone that's listening, thank you for listening. Like the podcast or follow the podcast. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on TikTok. I actually just dropped a YouTube channel as well,
Ooh.
Excelcast. Everything is at Excelcast. The only thing that's Excelcast _ Instagram. Do the poll, do the Q&A below. And as always, stay blessed and excel.